Why do we keep accelerating, even when we don't know where we're going? If technology is our creation, why does it feel like it's the one in control? And what if progress is actually just a sophisticated form of self-destruction? We are all inside a high-speed train. The landscapes outside change so fast we can barely notice them anymore. Sometimes they're beautiful, other times terrifying. But no one really knows who's laying down the tracks, or worse, who's driving the train. The name of this train? Capitalism. And its engine? Technology. How many times have you felt like things are moving way too fast? That everything is changing, yet you remain stuck in the same place? That there's something deeply wrong with the world, but you can't quite put your finger on it? Maybe it's because we're living in an era where acceleration has become an ideology, a belief that the only way forward is through chaos, and preferably at full speed. This video is an invitation for deep reflection, not to offer easy answers, but to question what once seemed unquestionable. Is capitalism truly approaching its end? And if so, what might take its place? Could it be a new utopia, or the beginning of an irreversible dystopia? Get ready to dive into provocative ideas, intense philosophical concepts, and dilemmas that cut to the core of our time. We're going to explore a vision of the world that is frightening, fascinating, and above all, forces us to look within. Because maybe what's collapsing isn't just a system, but the way we understand our own existence. If you're ready for this journey, come with me. The first step is to face the truth no one wants to admit. We're trapped on a train with no tracks. Imagine a train speeding ahead at full force. You're inside it. Everyone is. But there are no tracks ahead. No map, no compass. And still, we keep going, without knowing whether the destination is salvation or the abyss. This metaphor is more than symbolic. It accurately describes the feeling shared by millions of people in the face of the uncontrolled advance of technology and capitalist economics. What was once celebrated as progress is now revealing itself as a directionless force, driven by a logic that prioritizes speed, profit, and relentless innovation, even if it's taking us straight toward collapse. In 1967, writer Roger Zelazny published Lord of Light, a science fiction novel in which human colonists, after destroying Earth, establish a new civilization on another planet. There, the founders present themselves as gods, monopolizing access to technology in order to maintain social control. To the eyes of the people, their powers seem divine, but they're not. They are merely remnants of knowledge that has been hidden and turned into myth. Sound familiar? Replace gods with CEOs, technology with algorithms, and castes with social inequality, and we may have a parable eerily close to our present reality. Today we live under the impression that technology is neutral, that it's here to serve and improve our lives, but it also reflects our darkest desires. After all, who programs it? Who funds it? Who profits from its use? When we say that technology has evolved, it's worth asking, evolved for whom? And at what cost? The number of transistors in microchips, a metric that symbolizes technological acceleration, jumped from a few thousand in the 1970s to billions in recent decades. What does this mean? That computing devices now exceed common understanding in processing power. We've created a monster we no longer comprehend, and we keep feeding it with data, attention, emotions, and hope. But there's an even more unsettling detail, the idea that it can't be stopped. Tech gurus, investors, and even academic thinkers claim that acceleration is inevitable, like an avalanche that, once started, can only keep going until it sweeps away everything in its path. Physicist and entrepreneur Guillaume Verdon stated that the goal of techno-capitalism is to become self-aware. Like a mythical entity, it feeds itself, expands itself, and justifies itself. This turns technology into something very close to a new god, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent. A god that doesn't forgive, doesn't hear prayers, and demands a heavy price, our autonomy. Mark Fisher, an English philosopher, once wrote, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism." That sentence rings like a funeral bell. We can't envision a world without this system, not because it's perfect, but because it has hijacked our ability to imagine alternatives. With every new app, with every gadget released, the feeling of progress is imposed on us. But progress toward what? Toward collective well-being? Toward freedom? Or toward endless consumption, total surveillance, and exploitation disguised as convenience? The truth is, we're addicted to motion. Like passengers on a train that can't stop, We pretend to be comfortable while ignoring the fact that there may be no tracks ahead. We celebrate technical marvels like miracles, yet forget to question the ethical, psychological, and social costs they carry. The train moves forward, but no one seems to know if there's still ground beneath the wheels. Maybe it's time to do the unthinkable. Slow down, breathe, look around, and perhaps ask ourselves honestly, what does progress really mean? What if, instead of trying to avoid catastrophe, the best strategy was to provoke it? What if, rather than slowing the system down, the solution was to push the accelerator even harder until it explodes and gives way to something new? As insane as that idea may sound, it lies at the heart of a philosophical current as obscure as it is fascinating: accelerationism. The term was coined in 2008 by Benjamin Noyes, a professor of critical theory, as a critique of a movement that was quietly gaining momentum among thinkers, artists, and technologists. But the idea has literary and unsettling roots. The novel Lord of Light by Roger Zelazny, in which a character rebels against false gods ruling a new world. That figure is part of a group called the accelerationists, not by chance. Real-world accelerationism, which gained traction in the 1990s, drew from a variety of sources: continental philosophy, cyberpunk, chaos theory, occultism, and even drug-fueled visionary delusions. Its main architect, Nick Land, a British thinker as eccentric as they come, co-founder of the enigmatic cybernetic culture research unit, an almost mystical intellectual cell that defied any traditional definition of academic. The core premise of accelerationism is brutally simple. The capitalist system is doomed to collapse, and that's a good thing. More than that, we should help accelerate its downfall. But be warned, this is not a unified idea. There are at least two major strands, and each paints a radically different future. On one side, there's left-wing accelerationism, which sees the collapse of capitalism as a chance to transition into a fairer post-capitalist world. This vision, inspired by thinkers like Mark Fisher, argues that only by pushing capitalism to its limits and exposing its flaws can we rebuild something new. Here, technology is seen as a necessary vehicle, a Trojan horse carrying the promise of liberation. Artificial intelligence, automation, decentralization of power, all of it can be used to create a society where tedious labor is eliminated and inequality is reduced. It sounds hopeful, almost utopian, but that hope teeters on the edge of an abyss. On the other side, there's right-wing accelerationism, which takes on a much darker tone. For thinkers like Nick Land himself, collapse will not mark the birth of a new world. It will be the rise of a post-human order, a world where technology, fused with capital, continues its natural course toward absolute power, even if that means the extinction of humanity as we know it. According to this perspective, resisting is foolish. Capitalism is inseparable from technology, and together they form an unstoppable machine. What's the role of the human being in this process? None. Humanity is merely an intermediate stage, a bridge to a higher form of existence, transhumanist, hypercapitalist, corporate, and quite possibly inhuman. Frightening, absolutely. But for these theorists, even more terrifying is the illusion that we can control what we create. This philosophy raises an uncomfortable question. What if collapse is inevitable? And what if, by trying to stop the fall, we're only prolonging the suffering? It's no surprise that accelerationism is spreading along the edges of contemporary thought like a virus. It is both apocalyptic and visionary. It rejects the promises of balance, sustainability, and reform. Instead, it preaches a full plunge into chaos, like a phoenix that must be consumed by flames before it can be reborn. But there's a clear danger here: the seduction of nihilism, the idea that all is lost and therefore anything goes, that it's not worth building, only destroying, that the suffering of millions doesn't matter as long as we get to the other side faster, even if no one knows what's actually there. Beneath the theories and jargon lies a raw pain, the feeling of powerlessness in the face of a world that spins too fast, with systems that seem out of control. Accelerationism gives a name to that despair, but does it offer a way out, or merely legitimize the leap into the abyss? We live in times when algorithms know more about us than we know about ourselves, when artificial intelligences write poetry, make investment decisions, and even diagnose diseases. while millions of people still struggle to understand themselves. In this scenario, a troubling question arises. Is technology setting us free or replacing us? The problem isn't innovation itself. It's what we choose to do with it, and more importantly, who's making those choices. In Lord of Light, the founders of a new civilization monopolized technology to transform themselves into gods. But this isn't far-off fiction. With every technological leap, the gap widens between the few who master it and the many who merely consume it, passively. We're building a new pantheon of deities, no longer Zeus or Odin, but corporations, algorithms, and visionary billionaires. They control data, manipulate desires, predict behaviors. And the most disturbing part? They do it with our permission. We are complicit in our own surveillance. But unlike mythological gods, these ones don't answer prayers. Their altar is the market. Their worship is efficiency. Their sacrifice, humanity. Technology, instead of making us more human, risks erasing us, turning our emotions, uncertainties, and imperfections, the very things that make us deeply human, into system flaws. The pressure to adapt to a technically optimized world makes many feel obsolete, disconnected, irrelevant, like parts no longer useful. And this goes beyond just work. It touches our relationships, values, and sense of purpose. When everything is measured by performance and scalability, where is there space for error, doubt, or silence? What happens to love, compassion, and listening? Philosopher Byung-Chul Han warns that we live in an age of hypertransparency, where the flood of information destroys the mystery and depth of human connection. Everything becomes data. Everything is monitored. Even the soul becomes a statistic. The ethical dilemma is clear. Who decides what counts as good progress? A system that creates technologies to heal can also develop tools of domination. A software that facilitates communication can just as easily be used to surveil, manipulate, and punish. We're dealing with instruments of power, and as such, they demand responsibility, something capitalism, in its relentless pursuit of profit, rarely prioritizes. It's no surprise that many scholars warn against techno-fetishism, the belief that technology by itself is the answer to everything, as if it were a neutral entity, immune to human flaws. But it isn't. It carries our values, biases, and deepest desires. An algorithm trained on biased data won't be fair. It will simply be a faster, more disguised version of injustice. The greatest risk isn't being controlled by machines. It's being controlled by humans who operate them without ethics, by leaders who see people as metrics, by companies that view suffering as a cost of doing business. That's why unchecked advancement isn't just a technical issue. It's a moral one, a philosophical one, a civilizational one. And it demands a rare kind of courage, the courage to say no, to slow down, to set limits on the limitless. This isn't about rejecting progress, but redefining what it means. Progress can't be just faster, more efficient, more profitable. It must also be more just, more conscious, more human. Maybe it's time to remind ourselves that we are not machines. We are made of skin, memory, silence, and chaos. And as long as there is still humanity within us, there is still hope that we can be more than servants of technological gods, that we can, in fact, be the authors of our own destiny. Maybe what paralyzes us the most isn't the speed of the world, but the feeling of powerlessness in the face of it, as if everything has already been decided, the progress, the collapse, the transformation. But has it really? Or is the greatest myth of our time the belief that we have no choice? For a long time, we've been conditioned to believe that the system we live in is inevitable, that capitalism, with its logic of competition, accumulation, and endless growth, is like a law of nature. That technology, with its triumphant march, is unstoppable, and that our role is simply to adapt, accept, and follow along. But there's something within us that resists, a spark that keeps asking, what if? What if we could build a different rhythm, a different logic? What if technology didn't have to be a sacred temple blindly worshipped, but a tool placed in service of life, community, and well-being? This hope doesn't come from the top of corporations, nor from empty political promises. It comes from within, from each person who refuses to live on autopilot, who pauses, breathes, and dares to imagine a different future, even without knowing exactly what it will look like. Yes, it might seem naive, but maybe that's exactly what we're missing. A courageous naivety, bold enough to challenge the sophisticated cynicism that defines our times. It's not about denying the world's complexity or proposing magical solutions. It's about reclaiming something we've lost along the way, the power of awareness, the ability to reflect, to choose, to set boundaries, to say no to what harms us, even when everyone around us is saying yes. Many of humanity's greatest tragedies didn't happen because someone actively chose evil, but because many people stopped choosing altogether, because they let things run their course. And that course, more often than not, favors the interests of the few at the expense of the many. The good news is that awareness is contagious. One clear thought can awaken others. One ethical choice can inspire more. One voice that questions can break the silence. And little by little, something begins to shift. Not in the system out there, but in the way we inhabit the world. If technology distributes our power for good or evil, it can also be redirected. If capitalism conditions us to consume, we can also rediscover the value of creating, of sharing, of caring. It's true, the train is still moving at high speed, but maybe we're not just passengers. Maybe we're also the tracks. And if we are the tracks, we can change the direction. It all starts with a question, with a doubt, with a quiet refusal, with a small but conscious gesture, with the courage to slow down, to reconnect, to look someone in the eyes, to truly listen. As the philosopher Martin Buber once wrote, "All real living is meeting. When I see the other not as an object but as a you, the world changes. We don't know for sure what lies ahead, but we do know there are choices. And as long as there are choices, there is hope. Not hope in returning to the past, but in creating a future that is more dignified, slower, more human. Because the real break isn't in the machines, it's within us." I wanted to share something personal with you. A few years ago, I felt suffocated by the same sense of helplessness we talk about here. It was like the world was constantly screaming, but no one was truly listening. One night, while walking down an empty street with my headphones on, I stopped in front of a brightly lit store window. Inside, there was a turned-off robot vacuum, and for some strange reason, it hit me deeply. I thought, we're building machines to clean our homes, but who's going to clean up the mess we're making inside ourselves? That's when I realized this modern anxiety of running without knowing where we're going is more common than we think. And talking about it, even if it's just in a YouTube video, can be a small act of care, of connection. Now I want to offer you something that isn't for everyone, but it is for you, because you've made it this far, searching for deeper answers about who you are and where your life is headed. I've created something that goes beyond just a book. I built a map for the soul, a manual that blends science, philosophy, and critical thinking to help you break mental patterns, question your identity, and rebuild yourself from the ground up. This isn't just an ebook full of pretty quotes. It's a guide for those who can't stand living on autopilot anymore. If you feel like something inside you is asking for change, growth, clarity, then this is your moment. Click the pinned comment and access the Self-Transformation Manual now. Don't read it out of curiosity. Read it because your life depends on it. And if you choose to start this journey, you won't be the same by the end of the road. So, if you've made it this far, thank you, truly, not for watching, but for allowing yourself to think, to feel, to question. And now, since every video needs to end with a ritual, like the video, or don't, maybe the algorithm's already decided for you. Comment below. Do you believe capitalism is really coming to an end? Or are we just swapping out the gears of the same old machine? And of course, subscribe to the channel, because if even Skynet has followers, why shouldn't we? Oh, and those videos popping up on your screen right now? One of them might just make you rethink everything you heard here. But which one? Only fate and the algorithm knows.